So today we are going to look into some important topics from the GS1 perspective from ancient India, and so we'll start with sculptural traditions in ancient India. डिटेल में हमने ऑलरेडी कवर कर लिया है अबाउट द इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन इन वन ऑफ द वीडियोस before, wherein we have talked about the sculptural traditions in ancient India, and we've also talked about the art and craft in the Indus Valley civilization already. जहाँ पे हमने बात की थी about the stone sculptures such as the bearded man sculpture, and then the male torso that was found in Harappa, and the metal sculptures that were made in the Harappan time using the lost wax technique, and then terracotta sculptures which are very crude. For instance, the mother goddess sculpture and the different seals of the Indus Valley civilization times, and the prominent seals such as the Pashupati seal and the unicorn seal and the bull seal, the humped bull. All of that we have seen, and also we were able to see that we were able to infer that the people of the Indus Valley civilization were great lovers of fine arts, especially dancing, painting, and creating sculptures. Now we will look next at the Mauryan phase, the sculptural tradition in the Mauryan phase. So now looking at the Mauryan phase. So this Mauryan phase of sculptural tradition, or the sculptures that were there in the Mauryan era, were bold, and they were marked by absolute realism, and they employed foreign elements. And Mauryan sculptures को हम differentiate कर सकते हैं into two parts. One is the court art, and the other is the popular art. अब court art includes pillars and their capitals. Popular art consists of sculptures such as the Yakshas and the Yakshinis. तो ये जो कोर्ट आर्ट है, this also includes the Mauryan court art. This also includes the Ashokan palace at Kumrahar, जिसके walls were filled with carvings and sculptures. They were decorated with carvings and sculptures. So court art के अंदर this also comes, that is the Ashokan palace at Kumrahar. Pillars की अगर हम बात करें तो in Ashokan times pillars were inscribed as a symbol of the state, or to commemorate battles, or to spread sermons. So during the Mauryan times, the important function of the pillars, the Mauryan pillars, was that it was to impress and overawe the common people with the power and majesty of the rulers. So one of the important pillars is the lion capital at Sarnath. This lion capital was discovered more at Sarnath near Varanasi, is generally referred to as the Sarnath lion capital. And this was built in somewhere around 250 BCE. And this is made of polished sandstone. So ये जो lion capital है at Sarnath, this is now, as you might be aware, a national symbol. And it is considered to be the finest example of Mauryan sculptural tradition. So ये जो lion capital है at Sarnath, this is one of the finest examples of sculpture from the Mauryan period, and इसको बनाया गया था by Ashoka. Ashoka made this, and this was made in commemoration of the first sermon of Buddha, जिसको बुलाया जाता है also as धर्मचक्र परिवर्तना or धर्मचक्र प्रवर्तना. Right, so this is in commemoration of Buddha's first sermon. If you remember, Buddha gave his first sermon in Sarnath. So ये जो सारनाथ पिलर है, basically इसके 5 component हैं. One is a pillar shaft. This is a pillar shaft. This is a pillar shaft. And then there is a lotus bell or a base. This यहाँ पे this is a lotus shaped base. Inverted lotus की तरह एक base है. And so ये जो lotus base, lotus bell है, this lotus bell, उसके ऊपर there is a drum, or what we can call an abacus, जहाँ पर there are 4 animals that are proceeding in the clockwise direction. There are 4 animals we can See, the four animals basically are going in the clockwise direction, and ये जो abacus है इसमें there are four wheels या four chakras, and with 24 spokes. हर चक्र में 24 spokes हैं, as you know, and they are in all four directions. ये जो wheel है, this represents the dharma chakra in Buddhism. That means that is the wheel of the dharma or the dhamma. एंड हर व्हील के बीच में एक एनिमल कार्व्ड है, एंड कौन कौन से एनिमल्स हैं इसमें? बुल है, हॉर्स है, एलिफेंट है, एंड लायन. Okay, and these animals appear as if they are in motion, and they are in motion in the clockwise direction. And the abacus is supported by an inverted lotus capital, this one. And ये वाला, ये तो main है. This is basically the figure of four majestic back-to-back lions on this particular circular abacus. And ये जो figures हैं of the lions, they are grand, and इससे what we can understand is that Ashoka probably wanted to evoke magnificence, right? And the crowning element here is the Ashokan chakra or the Dharma chakra. So these are the parts of the Sarnath pillar. Then there is this pillar at Vaishali, which is also relevant. The Ashokan pillar at Vaishali is different from the other Ashokan pillars or the earlier Ashokan pillars because it has only one lion in the capital. यहाँ पर जो है, there is only one lion. And the location of this pillar is next to a brick stupa, and this basically commemorates Buddha's last sermon. ये जो lion है इसमें, this faces north, and this is the direction Buddha took on his last voyage. So there is also a small tank here that is known as Ram Kund, and Ashoka became a great follower of Buddhism after the Kalinga War, and basically he erected his famous Ashokan pillar in Vaishali, and this was to commemorate the last sermon of Buddha. So ये जो pillar है at Vaishali, this is made of a highly polished single piece of red sandstone, and it is surmounted by a bell-shaped capital. Now, the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. The Allahabad pillar is also known as the Ashoka Stambh. And there are three sets of inscriptions on the column from three emperors on this Allahabad pillar. Right? One is by Ashoka, one inscription, and the other by Samudragupta and the other inscription by Jahangir. So Ashokan edicts, so Ashoka's inscriptions hain, those contain 6 edicts of Ashoka, and also the schism edict and the queen's edict. Ab Ashokan edicts, देखिए 6 edicts of Ashoka. One is major pillar edict 1, जहाँ पर Ashoka talks of the principle of protection of the people. Then there is this major edict का मतलब क्या होता है? Official order or proclamation, right? And then the second major pillar edict of Ashoka defines Dhamma as minimum of sins, many virtues, compassion, liberality, truthfulness, and purity. The third major pillar edict 3 talks about abolition of sins or harshness, cruelty, anger, pride. Ashoka's major pillar edict 4 deals with duties of Rajukas. Then there is this major pillar edict 5, जहाँ पर there is a list of animals and birds which should not be killed on some days, and another list of animals which are not supposed to be killed at all. This basically, the pillar edict 5 also describes the release of 25 prisoners by Ashoka. Then there is the 6th major pillar edict that talks about Dhamma policy. So basically we see, and then there is this pillar edict 7 which talks about the works done by Ashoka for Dhamma policy, and he says that all sects desire both self-control and purity of mind. Basically, Ashokan inscriptions on the Allahabad pillar, ये जो inscriptions थे अशोका के on the Allahabad pillar, they were written in Brahmi script, and these inscriptions on the Allahabad pillar were important in deciphering the Brahmi script. And इसको किसने decipher किया था? This was deciphered by James Prinsep of the Asiatic Society. So इसकी वजह से ये जब decipher हुआ Brahmi script, this led to the rediscovery of the Mauryan emperor, and it led to the unearthing of the full extent of the empire, right? And ये जो 6 edicts हैं, that they can be seen in other pillars also. But Allahabad pillar, apart from the 6 edicts, also includes these two. Schism edict, that is the orders to the officials that Ashoka gave, and also there is this Queen's edict that is there in the Ashokan pillar. And the Queen's edict में क्या है? That refers to the charitable deeds of Ashoka's queen, that is Karuvaki, right? And then the Ashokan pillar contains Samudragupta's inscriptions. The Allahabad pillar contains Samudragupta's inscriptions, and a later inscription by Samudragupta is considered the most important historical document of the classical Gupta age. And this is written in Sanskrit, and this was written in excellent Sanskrit by his court poet Harisena. And he mentions Samudragupta's military and political conquests and his invasion of South India. So here we get to know this as well. Then there is also an inscription by Jahangir. Jahangir's inscriptions on the Allahabad pillar, where in fact written over. So they overwrite Ashoka's inscription, and this was written by his favorite calligrapher Mir Abdullah Mushkin Kalam, and this was written in Persian by Jahangir, and this overwrites Ashoka's inscriptions. और भी pillars हैं that contain Ashoka's edicts. The pillars at Lauria, Areraj, and Lauria Nandangarh are pillars that contain, are also a few pillars that contain Ashokan edicts. There is also another popular art. So we saw that Mauryan art, Mauryan sculptures can be divided into court art and popular art. A popular art may, in the Mauryan period, we see the images of Yakshas and Yakshinis, and इनके कई अलग अलग depictions होते हैं. Yakshas basically they refer to nature's spirits, usually benevolent, and also known as fertility spirits. And Yakshini is the female counterpart of the male Yakshas. And both Yaksha and Yakshini are said to attend to Kubera, the Hindu god of wealth who rules in the mythical kingdom of Alka. And Yaksha refers to also one of the exotic tribes of ancient India. Anyhow, यहाँ पर in the Mauryan age, the sculptures of Yakshas and Yakshinis fall into the category of popular art. And Yakshas and Yakshinis are also said to be the caretakers of natural treasures, and they find a prominent place not only in Buddhism, but they find a prominent place in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhist literature as well. There is this Didarganj Yakshini, you can see from here, and this is said to be one of the finest examples of the popular art of the Mauryan times. And another example of the popular art in the Mauryan period is this elephant sculpture at Dhauli. So basically Dhauli is located in the ancient city of Kalinga, and ये जो this place was basically captured by Ashoka after bloody warfare, and a lot of lives were lost in this war. And this rock cut elephant basically is one of the oldest carved structures of the Mauryan Empire, and the elephant here is facing the east. So we can see that this is a rock cut. It is cut out from a rock, and this is one of the oldest carved structures of the Mauryan Empire. Dhauli, elephant structure at Dhauli. The post-Mauryan phase of sculpture, when we talk about the post-Mauryan phase, basically Mauryan Empire के decline के बाद, in the 2nd century BCE, various rulers controlled the regions that were once controlled by the Mauryans. And rulers like Shungas, Kanvas, Kushans, Guptas in north and central India, and the Satvahanas, Vakatakas, Ikshvakus in southern and western India. अब इस टाइम पे in this phase, three different schools of sculpture developed in three different regions of India, and they were the Gandhara school of sculpture, Mathura school of sculpture, and the Amravati school. So teen schools develop हुए. We'll look at them. So let's have a comparative study of various sculpture traditions. These three sculptural schools. First of all, Gandhara school. Where did it develop? So this Gandhara school basically developed in the northwest frontier of India and in Pakistan near Peshawar and Afghanistan. And the major centers of Gandhara school of art were Jalalabad in Afghanistan, Hadda, Bagram in Afghanistan, and Takshila in Pakistan. Mathura school कहाँ पर develop हुआ था? It was developed on the banks of the river Yamuna in Mathura, from where it derives its name, and regions surrounding Mathura. Major centers were Mathura, Song, Kankali Tila. Amravati school developed in the Krishna Godavari region and Amravati and Nagarjunakonda. Who were the patron kings of Gandhara? The Gandhara school was patronized by the Kushan rulers like Kanishk and later by Sakas or Shakas. And the patron kings of the Mathura school of art were the Kushanas or the Kushan rulers, and the Amravati school was patronized by Satvahana rulers. Which religion influenced the Gandhara school? Buddhism was the religion that influenced the Gandhara school. So this was based mainly on Buddhism. The sculptures were based on Buddhism, and Mathura school was influenced by Hinduism, both Shaivite and Vaishnavite. It was also influenced by Buddhism and Jainism. And Amravati school was influenced by Buddhism. Remember Amravati school by Satvahanas. It was patronized by Satvahanas, Mathuras by Kushans, and Gandhara also by Kushans and later by Shakas. Right? And what were the external factors that influenced the Gandhara school? The Gandhara school has a lot of Greek influence and is also called as the Greco-Indian school of art or Hellenistic sculpture. Mathura school, on the other hand, there is no influence, outside influence, and it is completely indigenous, and most of the images are based on earlier indigenous Yaksha images found during the Mauryan Empire or during the Mauryan times. ये भी Amravati school भी कहीं it does not have any external factors that influenced it. There is no outside influence, and it is also completely indigenous. What material was used here in the Gandhara school? So there was this bluish grey sandstone that was used and stucco. And Mathura school में the material that was used was spotted red sandstone. So यहाँ पर Mathura school में spotted red sandstone, and in the Amravati school white marble was used. So bluish grey sandstone in Gandhara, and then there was the spotted red sandstone in Mathura and white marble in Amravati. The features of Buddhist sculptures तीनों में है. यहाँ पर कुछ additional भी है. In Mathura school also had Hinduism and Jainism, but Buddhism was common in all the three. So what was what were the features of Buddhist sculpture in the Gandhara school? See, in the Gandhara school, Buddha is in a spiritual state with eyes half closed, and Buddha has large ears. The sculptures of Buddha have large ears, and Buddha is seated like a yogi in this particular school of art. So, like you can see here, there has been in this Gandhara school of art, or what we can also call the Greco-Indian school of art, there has been minute attention that has been given to physical details of the Buddha, and we see that here the hair. So here we see that there's this wavy hair, and in some sculptures, Buddha also is seen as bearded, and Buddha has a lean body in this particular school of art. And Gandhara school में Buddha is found both seated and standing. Mathura school में if you see यहाँ पे again red sandstone use किया गया है. Mathura school में the features of the Buddhist sculpture ये है कि बुद्धा is seen in a delighted mood with a smiling face. Beard या mustache found नहीं होता है generally in this school of art on Buddha sculptures. Buddha is seen mostly in seated gracefully in Padmasana, and the body is muscular. And about Amravati school, these sculptures are basically narrative art. They are part of narrative art, and thus there is less emphasis on individual Buddha's sculptures, and there is greater emphasis that is laid on the life stories of Buddha, and sculptures are in the form of these stories and Jataka tales. Now, very quickly, looking at the architecture during the Satvahana rule. So, as already discussed, the Amravati school of art developed during the Satvahana period. So, during the rule of Satvahanas in South India from 2nd century BCE to 2nd century AD, Satvahanas studied their empire with several monuments. And the school of Buddhist art that belongs to the Satvahana, as I said, was known as the Amravati school of art. And इसके features we have already seen. अब Satvahana phase में बहुत सारे chaityas and viharas were cut out of solid rocks. And the most famous of them is in Amravati and Nagarjunakonda. Ashokan stupas को enlarge किया गया in the Satvahana rule, and the earlier bricks and woodwork were replaced with stone works, and the most famous among the stupas in the Amravati school are the Amravati stupa and the Nagarjunakonda stupa. The stupas at Amravati are predominantly made of white marble, and अगर हम अमरावती स्कूल का if you look at the sculptures of the Amravati school, we see that they depict various scenes from the life of Buddha. At Amravati, there is also a sculpture that shows a beautiful scene of Buddha's feet being worshipped. Secular images भी यहाँ पर बनाए जाते थे of females, trees, animals and birds. ये जो अमरावती में sculptures हैं, they have a very profound and quiet naturalism in human, animal and floral forms. One popular example of the Chaitya built in this time is the Chaitya hall built at Karle. Chaitya hall built at Karle is an example of the magnificence of the Satvahana sculpture. And in the Satvahana period, the sculptures also had eroticism as a predominant feature. White marble was extensively used at this particular time, and Jataka schools जो हैं, Jataka stories, Jataka scenes were portrayed in sculptures. And as I said, individualistic images of Buddha पर उतना focus नहीं था. rather life events of Buddha, or the we can say Jataka tales को depict किया जाता था. And the Amravati school actually had started the practice of depicting Buddha as a divine being. And here it is here that Buddha's in Amravati school, Buddha started receiving worship. Okay, and the Satvahana rulers basically have contributed a lot towards Buddhist art and architecture, and they reflected the best and supreme quality in each area of cave temples and architecture. Now we look at the very quickly the art and culture during the Gupta Empire. Gupta Empire को found किसने किया था? It was founded by Maharaja Shri Gupta, and it was an ancient Indian realm that covered much of the Indian subcontinent, approximately from 320 to 550 Common Era. गुप्ता रूल में टेरिटोरियल एक्सपेंशन तो हुआ था थ्रू वॉर, बट once it solidified, once the empire was solidified by the territorial expansion, then began a period of peace and prosperity marked by advancements in science, in technology, in art, engineering, literature, logic, mathematics, astronomy, religion, and philosophy. So, as far as the society is concerned, the position of women was that women mandatorily followed the socio-religious scriptures, and they are said to be even considered equivalent to the Shudras at that point of time. The sati system was prevalent, and widow remarriage was non-existent. अब sati system की अगर हम बात करें तो the first epigraphical evidence of the sati system or the sati is found in the Iran pillar, and there is an inscription by Bhanugupta, and this inscription provides the evidence of sati in this particular period. In the Gupta period, the Varna system was prevalent, and the society was divided into 4 Varnas, and Brahmins were considered the highest in the order. Brahmins को एक land grant दिया जाता था. Brahmins received land grants with tax exemptions, and their settlements were called as Brahmadayas. The settlements of the Brahmins were called as Brahmadayas, and the lowest Varna consisted of Antiyajayas and Chandals, and these people were not allowed to settle in the villages of the higher Varna people. However, ये जो position है इनका later Gupta period में improve हो गया. The marriage system here was that the polygamy was prevalent in ruling families, but intercaste marriages were strictly restricted. Polygamy was prevalent in the ruling families, and intercaste marriages were strictly restricted. Now, very briefly, the literature during Gupta times, there was a lavish patronage that was received for Sanskrit, and Sanskrit became the court language of the Guptas. This was reflected in the language written during this particular period. इसी time पर, in the Gupta's time, the Puranas, the Mahabharatas, and the Mahabharata and the Ramayana were finally compiled, and there was principles of poetics and drama were evolving in this particular phase, and the best contributors in literature were Kalidas, Dandin, Bhasha, and Shudraka. There was focus in areas like astronomy, drama, general science, fiction, theology, linguistics, and languages included Sanskrit, Prakrit, and Magadhi. So, what we see is that one of the reasons for the decline in Buddhism was that over time, after the Mauryan age, Buddhism lost royal patronage in the time of Guptas, because Gupta rulers were great patrons of the Brahminical religion. And so Buddhism lost the royal patronage that it received once during the period of Ashoka, Kanishk, and Harshvardhana. But however, we see that there, in as far as Gupta architecture is concerned, we see that there was patronage given to religious forms like Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. But one reason for the decline of Buddhism we see is that Guptas were great patrons of the Brahminical religion. अब गुप्ता डायनास्टी में that is the 4th to 6th centuries in north and central India, we get to see the first purpose-built Hindu temples which evolved from the earlier tradition of rock-cut shrines. So in the north central India, the first purpose-built Hindu temples evolved in the Gupta age. And they evolved from the earlier tradition of rock cut shrines. So this architecture was the architecture that was prevalent in the Gupta times was diverse in the forms of temples, there were stupas, there were caves, and architecture basically, is time per architecture, what we can say is that it was more or less secular in nature, and there was patronage to Hinduism, although, was given much more royal patronage, and in the Gupta era, the development or the patronage that was given to Brahminical religion or Hinduism pushed Buddhism to the back seat, we can say. And however, it's not that Buddhist art did not flourish. Buddhist art did flourish during the Gupta period to some extent. For example, the Ajanta paintings, there are statues of Buddha at Mathura and Sarnath. So, as far as the decline of Buddhism is concerned, so it is true that with the advent of the Gupta Empire, Buddhism was in its declining stage. And Hinduism experienced a revival under royal patronage. However, what we can say is that Buddhist decline was more of a natural and inevitable thing because काफी सारे factors थे that contributed towards the decline of Buddhism, and one factor was this, that royal patronage was given to Hinduism, and this was something that accelerated the decline. Royal patronage actually became the declining factor when Buddhism lost it after Ashoka's time, and Hinduism gained the patronage in Gupta's time. पर बुद्धिज्म के डिक्लाइन का एक कारण ये था, पेट्रनेज तो एक कारण था, बट उसके अलावा भी देयर वाज करप्शन, देयर वर सो मेनी स्प्लिट्स, डिविजन्स एंड रिफ्ट्स दैट टुक प्लेस इन द बुद्धिस्ट ऑर्डर, द reforms and rearrangements in Hinduism, and the acceptance of Buddha as a Hindu incarnation. So these are other factors that contributed to the decline of Buddhism. And because it was a time of wars, we see Buddhism was something that endorsed non-violence, and at this particular point of time, northern India was people were involved in a lot of wars, so they discarded this principle of non-violence, and that is one reason why perhaps there was a decline in Buddhism. However, Hinduism under Guptas became more simple and attractive. So at this particular time in the Gupta architecture, what we see is that temple architecture was the beginning of the Nagara style of architecture, right? So temple architecture में there are three. One is the Nagara style, one is the Dravida style, and one is the Vesara style. अब यहाँ पर in the Gupta period, the temple architecture was the beginning of the Nagara style, with either flat roof or small elevated shikharas. And also the Panchayatan style was included in the temples. Both bricks and stones were used for the construction purposes. तो ये जो पंचयतना style है, that is basically a style wherein the temple has a central shrine and it is surrounded by 4 other shrines. And so this also was included in the temples at this particular point of time, and both bricks and stones were used for the construction purposes of temples. Caves, cave structures may there was a focus on mural paintings that we get to see in the Ajanta cave structures and the Bagh caves in temples. We see there is this Bhitargaon temple, Devghar, Sanchi, and stupas also there. We see the Dhameka stupa. So, ye Dhameka stupa is in Sarnath. So basically, this was built much earlier from Ashoka's time. The basement is Ashoka's structure, but the stone facing is chiseled and and there is a display of delicate floral carvings that belong to the Gupta period. Now, coming to the sculpture in the Gupta period, the sculpture of the Gupta period was a logical outcome of the early classical sculpture of the Amravati and the Mathura schools. During this phase, there was a use of cream colored sandstone, and also there was a use of metal. Okay, and all these sculptures were dressed well without any form of nakedness. So, an example here is example of the sculpture in the Gupta period is the Sultanganj Buddha, and this is the largest substantially complete copper Buddha figure known from this particular time. And yahan par Buddha is standing in the Abhay Mudra and assuring protection. His hair is curled and he is smiling with eyes half closed. He is well dressed with graceful ornaments. So this is the Sultanganj Buddha. Also, there are another example of a sculpture from this particular time of the Gupta period is the stone carvings from the temples at Devghar and those from the temples of Udaygiri and Ajanta. These are excellent specimens of figure sculptures in their decorative setting. So there is this large panel of Sheshashayi Vishnu from the Devghar temple, and this represents the supreme being who is seen slumbering wakefully on the serpent Ananta, and this is basically something that symbolizes eternity. Ananta symbolizes eternity in the interval between the dissolution of the universe and its new creation. So this is an example of a magnificent sculpture from the Gupta period, and this basically, this sculpture is in the Devghar temple, Devghar. So this particular temple in Devghar is in Uttar Pradesh, basically is known as the Dashavatara temple. So this is an early 6th century Vishnu temple that was built during the Gupta time.